Hello everyone, it's Mr. Harding here, and I'm in a really fortunate position to take you through lessons 11 and 12 this week. Now I know last week Miss Divers very kindly took you through the last few lessons, and I was also in an extremely fortunate position to be able to read lots of Year 7 analytical paragraphs based on the question, how does Shakespeare present unrequited love in this scene? And it's really good to receive not only work from the classes that I teach, but also across Year 7. Now, this week is a little bit different in that there are only 2 lessons this week. The reason for that is, again, I'm very, very lucky to be able to support you in writing a bit more of a more in-depth C's paragraph at the end of the second lesson, looking into how we can use the structure of C's to write a fantastic response to a question, which I shall go through a bit later. And I shall also go through with you some extra supporting information we're going to be giving you and posting on Show My Homework. So some extra documentation for structures and support in writing that particular paragraph. Now you're going to need a pen and a piece of paper. Make sure your brains are ready. Make sure the big smile on your face, and I shall take you through each individual slide, give you a little bit of a twist on it at the same time, and make sure you understand completely what we expect of you over the course of the week. So to start off with, what I'd like you to do, please, is I'd like you to write the title, which is Lysander and Helena Part 1. And as you can see, we have a do now starter. Now, as you learned from the last week's lessons, there was a little bit of a disagreement between Helena and Demetrius, to say the least. What I'd like you to do, please, is to respond to the do now starter, which was Oberon was listening into the conversation between Helena and Demetrius. In your own words, explain what he would have heard them say to each other. So what would Oberon have heard when they were speaking to each other, when they were arguing with each other? And as an extension, can you remember one of the malicious, one of the unkind things that Demetrius said to Helena in that conversation? So if you're watching this on the YouTube or the MP4 clip, pause now and give the do now starter a go. So well done. Hopefully you recorded down a number of bullet points relating to the fact that they were both arguing with each other. There was a conflict between the two of them. You had heard the fact that Helena was pursuing, was following, was chasing Demetrius, and also that they were very much in disagreement regarding that very emotive word love. As an extension, you might remember some of the quotes, some of the unkind things that Demetrius was saying about Helena. Things like "get thee gone" and "follow me no more." I think if I can remember him saying that, "For I am sick when I do look on thee." And I love thee not, therefore pursue me not, you might remember. And do I not in the plainest truth tell you, I do not nor cannot love you? So you remember those really unkind comments that Demetrius was saying towards Helena. And equally Helena almost begging, almost saying, doesn't matter, you push me away, I still come, jumping straight back. Now, as a bit of a recap, so Helena is in love with Demetrius, we know that. Helena begs Demetrius to love her. Demetrius cannot stand Helena, cannot stand the sight of her, feels almost sick when he looks upon her. He is really cruel, really malicious to her. Now what I'd like to do, everyone, is I'd like to take you through a bit of a prediction and then follow it up with a summary. So almost a whoosh through this particular scene, and then look into some detail regarding conversation between both Helena and Lysander. Now, as you know, Oberon has heard this conversation between Demetrius and Helena, this argument, the fact that Helena is pursuing Demetrius, and felt really sorry for Helena and wanted to change what was being actually said just there, and the way in which Demetrius feels towards Helena. He wanted to play a trick on the two lovers. Now, Oberon feels a lot of pity for Helena, feels really sorry for her. Now, Puck is sent away, as we know, to go and fetch a love potion. He returns with that particular love potion. As we know, it's been shot by Cupid's arrow and has been transformed. Now Oberon tells Puck to find a man from Athens, and there's a real key there, just a man from Athens, not a particular man, but a man from Athens. Remember, they do look quite similar. And put the love potion in his eyes so that he will fall in love with the next person he sees. And you can see there Oberon saying, "Thou shalt know the man by the Athenian garments he hath on." So know him by what he is wearing. And that's the only information he gives to Puck, and doesn't give him any more detail. What problem can you find with this particular plan? What do you think could go wrong? So if you're watching the video, you can pause now and give it a go, or before you click onto the next slide, make sure you write down a few bullet points relating to that question. What problems is this going to cause, do you think, without giving that much information away? So we're going to quickly whoosh through into the summary of that scene. There's a very good reason for that as we move on to the next few slides. Now, Puck puts, unfortunately, the love potion into the wrong Athenian man. Instead of giving the love potion to Demetrius, he gives it to Lysander. Lysander wakes up, and the first person he sees is Helena. This means now that Lysander falls out of love with Hermia and in love with Helena. Demetrius still hates Helena. So clearly this has changed the whole dynamics, the whole situation in the magical woods. Now what I'd like to do, please, it obviously says on here that in pairs discuss the questions below. What I'd like to do is discuss with somebody in your house or whoever's next to you, or write down a few notes if you're alone. Why is this bad for the 4 Athenians? So why is this now caused a huge problem for them, given the fact that we know previously where Lysander and Hermia were going? How do you think Helena will feel when Lysander says he loves her? What is Helena now thinking as a result of this quick change, this transformation? So write down a few bullet points and I'll go through it with you in just a moment. So let's have a look at some responses that I've written for you. First of all, so to answer the question, why is this bad for the 4 Athenians? Now, this is extremely bad. Remember that all Athenians, because it means that they will all be experienced what we call unrequited love, so not being loved back. Helena loves Demetrius, Demetrius loves Hermia, Hermia loves Lysander, and Lysander now loves Helena. Now, to answer the question, how do you think Helena will feel when Lysander says he loves her? Now, I've put here that Helena could feel flattered, overwhelmed by Lysander's love, but she's also likely to be extremely confused, maybe a little bit upset as well, as she starts to all those emotions start to come out of her. Remember, this is a very, very quick change. She can't quite materialize what this might mean at this particular point. So I'd like to take you through a bit of a recap. As you can see, from before the love potion, we had Lysander and Hermia madly, deeply in love, wanted to go away and get married. And we can see that Demetrius also loves Hermia. However, we refer to that as unrequited love because Hermia does not love Demetrius back. And Helena loves Demetrius, and again referred to as unrequited love because Demetrius does not love Helena back. Yeah, as we know that he was particularly cruel to Helena. Now, I'd like to take you now into what happened after the love potion, after the juice from the flower was dropped into the eyes. So how has that changed the situation we see just there? How has it changed the dynamics of the 4 lovers? So we can now see, after this love potion has been dropped into the wrong Athenian man's eyes, so it's getting really quite exciting now, especially for the audience. Now, Hermia loves Lysander still. That hasn't changed. However, it has changed because it's unrequited love, because Lysander no longer loves Hermia back. Lysander now, however, is madly in love with Helena. Helena, however, is still in love with Demetrius. However, Demetrius does not love Helena back. Demetrius is in love with Hermia. However, it's not shared. Hermia does not love Demetrius back. So as you can see, there's a huge amount of confusion just there. And we've now got unrequited love amongst all 4 Athenians in some way. Now, I'd like to take you through now into a really engaging part of the play, which is Act 2, Scene 2. where for the audience it's hysterical. It's really funny because it's the first time we see that magic has interfered with the course of true love. Now, in this scene, Lysander wakes up and the first person he sees is Helena. So this means that Lysander falls out of love with Hermia, the person obviously he was going into the forest to go and get married to, and in love, however, now with Helena. Demetrius still hates Helena, so you can imagine how Helena might feel at this particular point, and it's those feelings that we're going to investigate when reading through Act 2, Scene 2, the script in just a moment. And also, like I say, if you were to watch this at the theatre or indeed a live performance at the cinema, you'd find this part extremely amusing because it's very much Helena not knowing what to do. She's extremely angry as well as confused at this particular point. Her emotions are all over the place. So let's have a quick read of the play script. Now, I'm going to introduce somebody else to you. This is Mrs. Harding, who's going to help and support with the reading of the play script. Now, I'm going to play Helena, and Mrs. Harding is going to play Lysander. So let's have a quick look.
And run through fire I will for thy sweet sake. Transparent Helena, nature shows art, that though thy bosom makes me see thy heart. Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword.
Do not say so, Lysander. Say not so. What though he love your Hermia? Lord, what though? Yet Hermia still loves you. Then be content.
Content with Hermia? No. I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent. Not Hermia, but Helena I love. Who will not change a raven for a dove? The will of man is by his reason swayed, and reason says you are the worthier maid. Things growing are not ripe until their season, so I, being young, till now ripe, not to reason. And touching now the point of human skill, reason becomes the marshal to my will, and leads me to your eyes, where I overlook love stories written in love's richest book.
Wherefore was I to this keen mockery born, when at your hands I deserve this scorn? So, there is the original text. On the right hand side you can have a look at the translation as well to help you understand some of the key points within it. So now that we've read the script together and that particular scene, I'd like to respond to these two questions and form that as part of your submissions, either on Show My Homework or indeed by email, whichever method you are using, or indeed taking a picture and sending it as an attachment as part of the learning for this week and as part of this particular lesson. So first question would be, how can you tell that Lysander is in love with Helena? Give at least two things he says. Also, how does Helena react to Lysander being in love with her? So two questions I'd like to respond to. Use the play script on slide 10. So if you're using the MP4 or the YouTube video, you can then rewind it a little bit to the previous few minutes and have a look at that and pause it while you read back through it. I'd like you say, to record that down either on paper or digitally and send that through to your particular class teacher as part of this particular lesson's learning and submissions. Okay, let's look at some of my responses to these two questions. Again, you might have written a few more extra bullet points, or you might have elaborated a little bit further on some of these sentences. You might have extended them further. Again, let's look at some of my responses to these two. So first of all, how can you tell that Lysander is in love with Helena? It says give at least two things, he says. First of all, he says that he will run through fire for her. He says he no longer loves Hermia. He says he will fight Demetrius for her. And he compares her to a pure and beautiful dove. Let me just stop for a moment just there, because that particular quote, which came from the previous scene that we just read, who will not change a raisin for a dove, a very famous line. Now, what Lysander is saying is that loving Hermia, who he used to love, instead of loving Helena, would be like loving a crow instead of a dove. This is saying a crow is an ugly bird compared to a dove. What he's literally saying is, who wouldn't trade a raven for a dove? Now, this irony here is ironic because his reason has nothing to do with why he now loves Helena. He loves Helena obviously because Puck has put the potion on his eyes, and she was the first thing that Lysander saw when he woke up. Now, question 2 says, how does Helena react to Lysander being in love with her? Clearly there's some confusion just there, but she thinks Lysander is making fun of her. She also criticises him for behaving badly and actually a little bit oddly. She can't quite understand it. And she gets angry with him. Now, this is a sort of a fight or flight situation. Her first response is that of anger. Now, as you know from lots of our English heritage lessons, we always look at specific vocabulary, and today I'd like to look at the word or words to mock. Now, obviously we're focusing on this scene. Now, Helena thinks that Lysander is what we call mocking her. Now, to mock someone is to make fun of them. So let's look at a few examples of the use of the word to mock. Now, the mean boy mocked his younger brother. So made fun of his younger brother. The girl was convinced her friends were mocking her. And the school bully always mocks his victims. We all dislike a bully, but that word mock in that sentence is perhaps used about taking the mickey out of them, being unkind towards them, but to those particular victims. So lots of different ways in which we can use the word mock. You might want to, at this stage, write your own sentence. We would perhaps do that in class. Write your own sentence which uses the word mock in some way, either mocking or mocks or the word mocked. Give it a go on a piece of paper if you want to. You can pause now and see what you come up with. There's no need to send it into your teacher, but it's always good practice to try and incorporate the use of those words into a sentence yourself. Okay, everyone, so now we've understood how to use the word mock, to mock, mock, to mocking and mocks in different ways, in different sentences. I'd like to apply that word into a question, because you've got a good understanding of it and that particular piece of vocabulary. Now, the question which I'm going to present to you in just a moment, I'd like you to obviously respond to that and send it to your class teacher as part again of this lesson and as part of the learning for this week. Now, the question states, why does Helena think that Lysander is mocking her? So, in other words, why does Helena think that Lysander is making fun of her in some way? To answer that question, we need to think about what's happened so far. With that, how had Lysander felt towards Hermia already? And why Lysander and Hermia fled Athens in the first place. And then also how Lysander describes his love for Helena. So why is Helena now thinking about that? Believe that Lysander is making fun of her. She's obviously very confused at this particular point, but based on her understanding of the whole situation, and remember she doesn't know what's happened with Puck and with Oberon, why does she believe that Lysander has changed or is doing this? What are her feelings towards that? What does she believe? Again, I'd like to write your responses down, like I say, and send it through to your class teacher, again, as part of either a Word document or on paper and take a photograph of it, however you normally do it. I know you've all been fabulous at it, and send it through to your class teacher as part of this lessons learning before the end of the week. Okay, so well done for doing that, and hopefully you've paused and given it a go. Now, I always try to provide you with a response from me as well to help and support you. So please don't just use that and use what I've written, but do try your best with your own. I know sometimes it can be a little bit tricky, but it's good to try and make a mistake and learn from mistakes. Remember, it's okay to do so. So what I've written just here in response to that question of why does Helena think that Lysander is mocking her, that Helena thinks that Lysander is mocking her because he's behaving very strangely. You might want to develop that word strange into the odd process that she's sort of showing. He has risked everything to come to the forest with Hermia, so it doesn't make any sense for him to declare his love for Helena. The way he describes his love for Helena is even more powerful than how he felt for Hermia. This makes Helena suspect that Lysander is making fun of her. Now, you might have developed that further and talked about the confusion aspect, the fact that she completely does not understand what on earth is going on, and that's why she believed there is mocking taking place. Okay, and we're coming towards the end of this first lesson. Now, as you know, normally in class, what we would do is we'd provide you with a pro form or a template to be able to analyse a particular quote to form parts of your notes and to help to support you as we go through the rest of the unit. Now, I've adapted this very, very slightly for you, and it's really down to you to be producing some independent work to some extent. Now, this is very simple and very quick to do, and you can choose the quote that you'd like to use to support. Some of you may want to do more than one quote, but the reason we use this structure, again, is to be able to infer and to analyse a particular quote and to write notes on it. So you don't have to copy out the whole slide just here, but you can either just write notes on the quote, but it's always good to be able to put some structure behind it. So you can see here what I've said is what's happening at this part of the play at this point. Who is talking, who are they talking to, and then some space to write a quotation and then some notes on the quotation. So what I mean here is taking a particular quote out of the scene we've just read, that Mrs. Harding and I just read together, and you're using that particular quote to maybe write into your own booklet as we move forward, or to be in your notes pages, or whatever you've got at home. Again, some of you may just want to use one of the quotes that you've particularly enamored with, which you particularly like, or you may want to use more than one quote to help support you at the end of this particular lesson. So let's have a look on the next slide, one which I've already done for you, and it might give you some ideas about what you might like to do. So what I've said here is, so what's happening in the play at this particular point? Now, as we know, that Lysander has just fallen in love with Helena because, of course, of the love potion that Puck has used in the wrong Athenian man's eyes. Who is talking? At this particular point, and from this particular quote, Lysander is talking directly to Helena. And he says to her, "And run through fire I will for thy sweet sake." So there's the quote I've used. You may choose to use a different quote from the slides a few moments ago, or you may choose to use that one indeed. You may choose to use the quote about a dove and about a raven. It's entirely up to you. And again, the notes at the bottom, this is where you just write a few bullet points or a few words, your analysis of that particular quote, the inference. So what does this quote tell us about how Lysander feels at this particular moment? Yeah, that if he's running through fire, it shows what he would actually go through, what he would do for Helena. It shows how much love he actually has for her. To what extent has that love potion changed the way he feels? He is now head over heels in love with Helena. You've done really, really well listening to me for these last few minutes, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure you've done a fabulous job in answering the questions and writing your paragraph based on the question, why does Helena think that Lysander is mocking her? We'll have a quick look at some questions like we'd normally do at the end of every lesson, just to make sure your knowledge is there and your understanding of what's happened so far. But again, like I say, a huge well done. You're doing a great job. So to finish off with this first lesson, I have 4 statements, and it says which statements are correct. Please don't look too far forward to think about it. I'd like you to think about it yourself. Now, first of all, when Lysander tells Helena he loves her, Helena reacts with happiness and joy when she says, "When at your hands did I deserve this scorn?" B. When Lysander tells Helena he loves her, Helena thinks he is making fun of her because she says, "When at your hands did I deserve this scorn?" C. When Lysander tells Helena he loves her, Helena thinks he is making fun of her because he says, "Hermia still loves you, then be content." And D. When Lysander tells Helena he loves her, Helena reacts with happiness and joy when she says, "Hermia still loves you, then be content." Which one of those statements do you think is correct? So just write down an A, B, C, or D, or more than one if you think that's the case. Okay, so those of you who answered correctly with B, when Lysander tells Helena he loves her, Helena thinks he's making fun of her because she says, "When at your hands did I deserve this scorn?" Yep, so the word scorn just there is an expression, is a feeling of contempt or disdain for someone or something. So well done for those who have put B, absolutely. And you've done really well, like I say, for the end of this particular piece of writing. And send in all your work, please, to your teacher, whoever your class teacher is, either by email or by showing my homework, and I'm sure they'll respond to you with some feedback. Like I say, keep going, Year 7, you're doing really, really well. So let's move on, either in this particular time period or to a next day, to the next lesson. Like I explained to you, there are 2 lessons for this particular week because of the large piece of analytical writing we're doing at the end. Well done. Hello, welcome back, Year 7. Some of you may be following on from the previous lesson, in which case you would have heard me just a few minutes ago. Some of you may be approaching this lesson on a different day of the week or doing it in separate pieces. Either way is absolutely fine. Now, like I explained to you at the beginning of last lesson, this week we only have 2 lessons. The reason being is this one, at the end of it, we're going to be writing a much more detailed analytical paragraph using our C's structure that we've been taught since the beginning of Year 7. We're also going to be providing for you some extra support to help you. Now, if you struggle a little bit with writing C's paragraphs, we're going to provide with you what we call a writing frame to drop your ideas into, to hang your ideas on. We're also going to be giving you some extra pieces of work for those who might want a challenge or to be pushed further, and how we can perhaps zoom out and look at the overall context of the question. Again, please, by the end of this lesson, I'd like to submit all your work to your class teacher, whoever that is, either on Show My Homework or indeed by email. I know some people take pictures of their work. When doing so, please make sure it's really clear so we can mark it and provide feedback rather than a blurry picture. I know it's quite tricky with the technology some of us got at home, but please do try your best. For this lesson, which we're classing as lesson 12, you're going to need a pen and a paper. It might be good to have lined paper to keep your ideas nicely formatted and structured. Again, you'll also need to make sure you've got your brains in gear and a huge smile on your face, which always helps us along the way. Okay, so let's make a start, Year 7. So I'd like to write down, please, the title. Make sure you underline it. Lysander and Helena Part 2. Also write the date. It's good practice, please, the long date. So as you can see, the date you've probably got on the screen there is a different one to what you can see in front of you. Again, I'm recording this on a different day, so again, you may have a different day on your PowerPoint or indeed on your MP4 or YouTube video, whatever you are watching. But please write today's date and underline both. The Do Now starter. So you can see on the screen, you've got the 4 lovers, Hermia, Lysander, Demetrius and Helena. I'd like to complete the diagram to show the person each character loves after Puck has used the love potion. Okay, so perhaps draw arrows. You can either draw little pictures if you want to, as well as the names, or you can just write the names. Please show the direction of those arrows to who loves who. You might even want to populate it with unrequited love as well, entirely up to you. As an extension, how do you think that Helena reacted when Lysander says he loves her? So remember our previous lesson, what did Helena do? What did she say? What were her emotions like when Lysander suddenly turns around after all that time and says he now loves her? So please write some responses to that extension and draw the diagram. Off you go. Please pause now if you're using the YouTube video. Okay, really well done, Year 7, fantastic. So well done for drawing your diagrams and drawing perhaps your arrows. As you can see, I've written on the board here the word unrequited love to show the direction of that and indeed the direction of who loves who. So you can see here that Hermia is still clearly in love with Lysander. However, that's unrequited love because Lysander no longer loves Hermia back, of course, and that Lysander is now in love with Helena. That's obviously under spell. We call that unrequited love as well because Helena loves Demetrius and not Lysander back. All very complicated, isn't it? All a bit of a mess now. And Helena loves Demetrius still, and again, unrequited love because Demetrius is in love with Hermia, but that again is unrequited love. Hermia does not love Demetrius back. From the extension perspective, which was how does Helena react when Lysander says he loves her? Now you might remember from the script, and I'm trying to remember the specific quotes, Helena stated, "Wherefore was I to this keen mockery born," if you remember. "When at your hands I deserve this scorn." So she can't quite believe it. She also states that, "Yet Hermia still loves you, then be content." What though he love you, your Hermia? Lord, what though? Again, she is extremely upset, concerned, angry. Can't quite believe this mockery is taking place. Okay, on to the first part of this lesson. Now, as you know, you have been introduced to what we call a C's paragraph, an analytic paragraph, which we use all through school, all the way from year 7 up to year 13. Now, the word C's is a way to structure our analysis of a particular quote or a question. Now, as we know, the first part of C's, the S stands for statement. So we have something to say. The E stands for evidence. So find something to prove it with. So a quote, for example. We then use the first I, which is inference. Now, we describe what it tells us in that particular point. It's an analysis. We infer. We then zoom in. So we have two Z's. We have a zoom in and a zoom out. The zoom in is specifically looking at any words within the quote, which we can then analyze further. And we explore that in greater detail. And then the zoom out is where you bring in what you know about it and the particular time, what we call the context, or where it was set, more of an understanding of a bit of background information. And then we have the last E of our C's paragraph, which is the effect it has on the reader or the audience in this case, and think about how it makes people feel. Okay, so that's our C's paragraph. Now, over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to be going through with you some statements and quotes and how they are matched together. And some students have written opening statements about Lysander and Helena. They've also added quotations to support these particular opening statements. And I'd like you to decide if the students have chosen good quotations to match that particular statement. So you'll also need to explain your decisions. Now, when writing analytical paragraphs, you must make sure you choose quotations that show the opening statement is accurate, it's correct, it avoids repeating the opening statement, so it doesn't do it more than once, and lasts no more than 2 lines. And if those 3 parts are satisfied, we know we've got a good quotation, and therefore a good mix between the statement and the quote itself. So like I say, I'm going to go through a few of these students' responses, and we're going to look to see whether this is particularly a good way or a bad way to use the quotation. Okay, so remember the 3 points to show that it's a good quotation. It shows the opening statement is accurate, it avoids repeating the opening statement, and lasts no more than 2 lines of writing. Now, here is a student's opening statement, followed by the quote they have chosen to support it, to back it up. It says here, Lysander's love for Helena is intense. So there's the statement. It then says, this can be seen when, after waking with the potion in his eyes, he says, and run through fire would I for thy sweet sake. Do you think this is a good way to use the quotation, or indeed a bad way? Think about, does it satisfy those 3 points above? Is it showing that the opening statement is correct, is accurate? Does it link to it? Does it avoid repeating the opening statement? And does it last no more than 2 lines of your writing? So just think for a moment, just write the word good or write the word bad. Do you think it's a good way to use the quotation or a bad way to use the quotation? Okay, thank you for writing down either good or bad, and you can see here that I've written that this is a good way to use a quotation because it is supported by those 3 different points. It does show the opening statement is correct. So when it says Lysander's love for Helena is intense, when he says, and run through fire for I would thy sweet sake, we know that is quite an extreme thing to do, so it does link to that opening statement. It doesn't repeat the opening statement, it doesn't say it again, and doesn't last for more than 2 lines. So we class that as a good way to support the quotation. Okay, it's a very, very good way. Again, I'm putting trust in you. If you're watching the YouTube video or the MP4, please make sure you do pause at the correct time to make sure you've got your good or your bad down, to make sure you learn from each step as we go along. But well done for everyone. Let's have a look at another one. So this time we have got Lysander's love for Helena is intense. This is demonstrated when Lysander says, not Hermia, but Helena I love. So, is this a good way to use the quotation or a bad way? Remember, it has to satisfy all 3 points for it to be a good quotation to back up this statement that says Lysander's love for Helena is intense, is extreme. There's no let up at all. So think for a moment, is it a good way to describe the quotation or a bad way? Write down good or bad and pause now. Okay, year 7, so well done. If you wrote that it's a particularly bad way to use the quotation, you're absolutely right. The reason for that is because the quotation doesn't show the opening statement is accurate, because nothing in the quote suggests his love is intense. Remember, that word intense is where there is a real focus of their intentions, or a focus of their particular love. It's growing very in a huge way, and just by saying not Hermia but Helena I love, there's no intensity to that. There's no thoroughness about that whatsoever. Okay, so it's not a very good quote, which is why I put a red cross to show at the top to show that the opening statement is not accurate, it's not correct, it's not linked together well enough. So make sure when you come to writing your analytical paragraphs, your quote does link to your statement itself. Let's look at another one. Okay, so this time we have another quote. You can see here, just by looking at, just think about the length of it just for a moment while I read it. So, Lysander's love for Helena is intense. This can be seen when he says, transparent Helena, nature shows art that through thy bosom makes me see thy heart. Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword. Quite a mouthful. So do you think this is a good way or a bad way to use the quotation to support that opening statement? So write good or bad and then pause please, or pause first then write good or bad and then move on. Right, thank you for unpausing. You're absolutely right if you wrote the word bad. Not a very good quotation to use because the quotation is far too long. This is also a particularly important sign that the student hasn't thought carefully enough about which bit of the quotation really supports the opening statement, because there may be part of it that could be used that would be an appropriate one, a good one to use to support the statement saying that Lysander's love for Helena is intense. But to say this can be seen when he says, transparent Helena, nature shows art that through thy bosom makes me see thy heart, whereas Demetrius, oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish in my sword. Again, you might want to just use the last part, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword. Again, you might want to choose just part of that, but not the whole lot, because it has to link directly to that particular statement. So writing it on too many lines or too much of a chunk from a play script or indeed a text, whatever you're using, is not a good way to support that opening statement. Okay, but well done. Let's look at another one. So we're starting to get the hang of this now, year 7, well done. Let's look at this one here. So now that Lysander loves Helena, he thinks Hermia is like a raven and Helena is a dove. This is demonstrated when Lysander says, who will not change a raven for a dove? Is this a good way to use the quotation or a bad way, do you think? So again, you can pause now and write the word good or write the word bad. Well done for unpausing or stopping at that particular point. You're absolutely right if you wrote the word bad. The reason for that is because it's ultra repetitive. Indeed, the statement refers to comparing a raven and a dove, and then indeed the quote also states the comparison between a raven and dove. So therefore, the quote is particularly pointless when trying to back up that statement. It becomes overly repetitive, which is not particularly good practice. So make sure the quote does link to the statement but doesn't repeat it. It helps to explain it further, and then when you come on to the inference part of your analytical paragraph, we can then start to delve deep into the explanation. Okay, so let's move on and look at one more. Okay, so this is the last one to look at. I think most of us getting the hang of it now, making sure we understand the quote has to meet those 3 points, and in a moment we'll just move on to analysing each of them a bit more. So this time it states, when Lysander falls in love with Helena, she assumes that he is making fun of her. Then we've got the evidence part. This is evident when she says, Wherefore was I to this keen mockery born? Do you think this is a good way to use a quotation, or indeed a bad way? Does it satisfy those three parts above, showing that the opening statement is accurate? Does it avoid repeating the opening statement? And does it last no more than 2 lines? So pause now and write good or bad, please, Year 7. You're doing a fabulous job. And you are absolutely right. You can see the 3 ticks at the top. That suggests that it is a good way to use the quotation. And we know that because where in the statement it says that Lysander falls in love with Helena, she assumes that he's making fun of her. We're using our understanding of the quote, where with the word mockery, we know from our understanding, having studied it already, to mock means to make fun of. So we're linking and showing our understanding between the statement and the quote together, which is why we've used that particular quote. Again, it shows the reader of your particular work that you understand, or they understand, that you have a good grasp of that particular vocabulary used. So it's a good way to use the quotation. Well done, Year 7. Okay, let's move on now. We've got the hang of that and how to link a quote to the statement to make sure it is accurate. Right, okay. Now, we know that number 2 was not a particularly good quotation. It didn't match the opening statement. Where he wrote, Lysander's love for Helena is intense. This is demonstrated when Lysander says, not Hermia, but Helena love. We discussed the fact that wasn't particularly an intense way of saying that Lysander had love for Helena. It wasn't particularly extreme. Now, I'd like you to think about what quotation you could use that would better support that statement, how Lysander's love for Helena is intense. So thinking back to our previous understanding, previous learning of that scene, you might want to rewind a little bit if you're using YouTube, or click back a few slides, or you can remember some of the quotes from or use your quotation hunter. So which quote do you think you could use to support that statement, to make it correct, to make it a good quote to support it? So perhaps you could write down the statement, Lysander's love for Helena is intense, and then you could use or back it up with a quote that you think is more appropriate, that satisfies the 3 points, that it's accurate, avoids repetition, and lasts no more than 2 lines of your writing. So pause now and write one yourself, please, and use that to form part of your submission to your teacher with this piece of work. So Year 7, here's a better example. It's always nice for me to provide an example of my own for you to help and support you. You may well have a different one, and again, that's absolutely fine. You may have extracted one from the scene or had one written down already. So Lysander's love for Helena is intense, and the quote I've used and the evidence I've used, this is demonstrated when Lysander says, and run through fire would I for thy sweet sake. We know that running through fire is quite an extreme thing to do, therefore suggesting that it could be intense. And again, it satisfies all 3 points regarding the making sure the opening statement is accurate, avoids repeating the opening statement, and doesn't last more than 2 lines of your writing. You can then start, after you've done that, to develop that further into your inference, your zoom in, zoom out, and effect it has on the reader. Start building your analysis up. Now, if you remember, number 3 was also not a particularly good quotation. It was far, far too long. It went on more than 2 lines. The statement said, Lysander's love for Helena is intense. Again, this can be seen when he says, transparent Helena, nature shows art that through thy bosom makes me see thy heart. Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword. Again, what I'd like you to do, please, you can pause in just a moment and see if you can write a better quote that supports that statement. You might want to, as a tip here, just use part of that quote, which is better prepares for the analytical paragraph, that shows that Lysander's love for Helena is intense. There is part of that you might be able to use as a little tip just there for you. So what could you use, and how could you drop that into it to make sure it satisfies all 3 points below just there? So pause now and write it out yourself, please. So here is a better example. Again, well done to those of you who pulled out the part, as you can see below in green. So Lysander's love for Helena is intense, extreme. This can be seen when he says, Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword. Just that very emotive word vile suggests a degree of intensity. So I've pulled out just part of the quote from the read above, so it's more appropriate and more in line, and it satisfies the 3 points below. So well done those of you who've done that, and again, indeed well done if you've chosen a different quote that suggests that Lysander's love for Helena is intense and what he would do for her. And lastly, we'll give one more go at this, please. Number 4 was also not a very good quote. It repeated, offered a degree of repetition, the opening statement. So it stated, now that Lysander loves Helena, he thinks that Hermia is like a raven and Helena is a dove. This is demonstrating when Lysander says, who will not change a raven for a dove? As you can see straight away that there is repetition of the words raven and dove. It doesn't really back up the statement in a way that sets you up for an analysis. It's just a repetition between the two sentences. What I'd like you to do is think about a different opening statement. So how could you write a different statement for this particular evidence? Okay, a different statement, not a quote, but a different statement to support it before that says. Now you may well have a different opening statement to the one I've written for you here as an example. This is a much better example for you. Now that Lysander loves Helena, he speaks cruelly about Hermia. This is demonstrated when Lysander says, who will not change a raven for a dove? Now, we know, therefore, there is no repetition anymore. We know that the opening statement is accurate and it's no more than 2 lines you're writing. Now, this sets us up really well to be able to delve deeper into that particular quote of why he stated that who will not change a raven for a dove. What does the word raven suggest and what does the word dove just mean, and would then potentially go into the analysis, the inference of that particular quote. Okay, so well done to everybody. You've done a really good job with looking through all of those, and hopefully you're well prepared now to start off with your analytical paragraph writing. So your main task to send to your teacher, as well as the little individual exercises, the responses to questions and so forth, your main task is to write a full C's paragraph, a developed C's paragraph, to answer the following question. How does Shakespeare show Helena's feelings towards Lysander in this scene? Now, you might want to write down that question now on a piece of paper as I'm talking, because we really need to think about exploring what the question says in order to be able to answer it. So how does Shakespeare show Helena's feelings towards Lysander in this scene? So we're focusing on what Shakespeare does in his language. What is he written to show those feelings? So you can use one of the following statements from today's lesson to help you. If you wish, you may choose to use a different one. You may choose to use the statement, when Lysander falls in love with Helena, she assumes that he is making fun of her. This then may be followed by, this is evident that, and then you can drop in your quote. Helena assumes Lysander is mocking her because his speech seems too intense. And then you can develop that further with the quote, this is demonstrated when, and you can drop in the quote. You may use the statement, Helen does not trust Lysander because of his sudden change in attitude towards Hermia. This can be seen when, and again you can drop in the quote. So you may need to refer back to the slide with the script on it to pull out those quotes to show your understanding and how the statement and quote link together. What I'd then like to do is comment next on what this quotation infers, the I part of our C's paragraph. What is being suggested by this particular quotation? So you're discussing it, you're talking about it, you're delving deeper into it. After this, I'd like to zoom into one of the words from within the quote, or the technique being used in the quotation, which makes your point even clearer. Finally, I'd like to comment on the effect of this on both the characters and the audience who are potentially reading or watching it. Okay. Again, like I explained to you earlier, we're going to support you with this by providing for you a number of different documents to help you at different levels. So those people who might be thinking, oh my goodness, this is really quite tricky, not sure where to start, we've got a separate writing frame, which will be on Show My Homework, for you to use to drop your ideas into, which structures your statement, your evidence, your inference, your zoom in, and your effect. And some people may want that extra challenge, and again we've provided another structure to support you and to things for you to think about. So some of you may be thinking about, oh, actually I think I can give zooming out a go, the second Z, where you bring in what you know about the time it was set in. You could talk about marriage that could be included in here, for example. And again, some of you may develop more the effect it has on the reader, the audience. And a little bit perhaps of a bonus where you could talk about how a Shakespearean audience and a modern one, so a link between the two. So please, when you've completed this, do send it through to your teacher and they can mark it and send it back to you with some feedback. Again, you can take a photograph and send it through, or you can send it through in a Word document or a submission via Show My Homework with an attachment. But please make sure you do spend some time on this. Remember, this is only a 2-lesson week for this exact reason. Again, if you have any questions, please do send those questions to your class teacher and they will respond to you as soon as they possibly can. Again, I've got an example to show you. Again, it's really good to see other people's writing and to get a feel of what's expected of you. So let's look at this next slide for that exact reason. Again, I can see on here, I have written at the top of the question and underlined it. How does Shakespeare show Helena's feelings towards Lysander in this scene? And again, you can see what I've done here. I have separated each part of my C's paragraph into different colours to show that structure for you. To start off with, the S refers to the statement. Helena assumes Lysander is mocking her because his speech seems too intense. So there's my statement, and that's backed up by evidence. This can be seen when he says, "Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword." The green part is the inference, the analysis. Here, Lysander is suggesting he wants to kill Demetrius for dishonouring Helena. However, she believes he wants to kill Demetrius for wanting to marry Hermia. At first, Helena is confused and then shocked, but before long she realises that the way Lysander is speaking is different to usual. In other words, she's a bit confused. The first Z, the zoom in the red just there, by saying words like vile, again you can see the quotation marks around the word vile because I'm pulling out that word from the quote. By saying words like vile and perish on my sword, Lysander is being very elaborate with his language, so Helena obviously thinks he is making fun of her because it's obviously quite extreme, it's not the norm. And then in the purple is the effect it has on the audience or the reader. You can imagine a performance with Lysander acting out these lines in a very exaggerated manner. In other words, his actual actions would be perhaps exaggerated and extreme, which would make Helena believe she was being used as the butt of his joke and create a very funny scene for the audience, aware of the confusion and its cause. When we say butt of his joke, it means the person who is being laughed at. So there's an example of an analytical paragraph. I'd like you to try and use your own. Again, you can use parts of mine if you want to, but please try to do your own and develop it further. You might want to use different quotes, of course, and different statements and develop it further. And some of you perhaps would like to, again, zoom out and maybe start off your context part as during ancient Greece, for example, and linking it back to your understanding that it did at the beginning of this unit. You might want to use different parts to your inference to start off your sentences. This tells us that, or this portrays. Lots of different ways in which you can structure it. Again, we'll provide that information for you in separate documents to help support your structure on Show My Homework. And remember, Year 7, that there is always a structure to our writing to making sure our grammar and punctuation are correct too. So let's have a quick look at our mastery checklist. So remember, when you've finished, just check your writing. Check 1. Is the quotation written in a sentence that makes sense? Check 2. Have you capitalised all proper nouns, so names, places, and referred to the correct characters? So have you put capital letters in the right places? Check 3. Have you used accurate spelling and punctuation in each sentence? And then check 4. Have you explained how your quotation supports your opening statement? In other words, link it back to the work we've been doing during this lesson. Does it satisfy those 3 points? Okay, so always after you're writing, go back over it, make sure it's accurate before you send it. Read it back to yourself, please, and make sure those 4 checks have been marked. And lastly, Year 7, thank you for listening to me today. Our quick mastery question. Here is an opening statement about A Midsummer Night's Dream. Before the lovers enter the forest, they know that they will have to overcome challenges to show that their love is strong and real. What would be the best evidence, the best quote to support this opening statement? Okay, A, the course of true love never did run smooth. B, who will not change a raisin for a dove? C, and run through fire would I for thy sweet sake. D, I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death. Which of those quotes best supports that opening statement? Have a think about it and just write down A, B, C, or D. Thank you for unpausing, and well done if you put A, the course of true love never did run smooth. It's about those overcoming those challenges, which perhaps is the clue just there to that particular quote to match that statement. Okay, Year 7, you've done really well today. I look forward to receiving the pieces of work certainly from my classes and perhaps seeing some others which are sent through to me. Remember to please submit all work from these last 2 lessons and we can help and support you and give you feedback. Again, a huge well done from me.